Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting in the vineyards of Talley Vineyards and Winery in the beautiful Arroyo Grande. I'm with Brian Talley, the man, the myth, the legend. Brian, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us a little bit about Talley Vineyards.
Sure. So Talley Vineyards is a family-owned and operated winery located in the Arroyo Grande Valley, which is part of the larger San Luis Obispo coast region. Mm-hmm. My family's been farming here for over 70 years. My grandfather started farming back in 1948, and my father started planting wine grapes back in 1982. And we've been making estate bottled wines, specializing in estate-grown Chardonnay and Pinot Noir since 1986.
Wow. So you're exclusively estate?
We are, yes. Every wine that we produce here is produced from estate-grown grapes.
Oh. What is your total acreage planted?
Right now, our total planted acreage is about 125 acres.
That's a lot.
It's enough to make some beautiful estate bottled wine.
That's right. And where are your wines available? Are they available in multiple markets? Is it mostly direct to consumer?
We sell close to half of our wine direct to consumer, but we are available in just about every state in the country. Predominantly, our signature wines are estate Chardonnay and Pinot Noir.
Fantastic. And last technical question, your total case production?
It's about 20,000 cases.
Okay, so nice medium-sized.
Yes.
So you're saying that you're a third-generation grape grower and second-generation winemaker, perhaps. I'm curious what your first memory relevant to wine is.
Gosh, I remember being, and it's kind of funny, this just comes to mind, remember being at Geyser Peak Winery when I was maybe 8 years old with a group of my parents' friends, and it was just the classic, like, when can we leave? I was incredibly bored. But, as I grew up, I got exposed to wine, especially in high school, and then ended up working in a wine shop when I was in college up in Berkeley, California, and that's where I really got bitten by the wine bug.
Uh-huh. So when you weren't bored by wine and trying to get out of the tasting room, and enjoying wine, is there a particular wine that was one of those aha moments, a really memorable thing? Maybe it was back when you were working in the wine shop, or maybe it was later in your career, but one of those wines that was kind of life-altering?
I would say that a wine that was life-altering for me was the 1985 Knudsen Erath Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley. And, up to that point, like a lot of younger, especially male wine drinkers, I was enamored of dark, rich wines. I kind of was very into Bordeaux and, Cabernet Sauvignon and heavier reds. And that was the first time I discovered really the beauty, the delicacy, the ethereal nature of Pinot Noir that I think really distinguishes it as really my favorite red variety.
Wow. So when your father had originally planted, was it Pinot and Chard here, or had he planted Bordeaux grapes in this area?
Well, like pretty much every wine grower who planted grapes in California in the early 1980s, he did have to plant some Cabernet Sauvignon. And of the 5 things he planted, that was the single abject failure. In fact, so my family, we got our start as vegetable farmers, and our signature crop was bell peppers. And the fact that this Cabernet Sauvignon that we made tasted exactly like the bell peppers that we grew on the farm was not a positive attribute by any means.
So I'm assuming there are no old Cabernets from Talley in your cellar. But if we were to come into your home and go into your cellar or your collection, what kind of wines would we find? What do you collect, or what are you drinking?
Well, I can tell you that there might still be a bottle or two of the 1986. We actually made 2 vintages of Cabernet Sauvignon, none of which were ever released commercially. So consequently, we ended up with a lot of that. And it's still, now it just basically tastes like old Cabernet bell pepper juice. But honestly, my cellar is full of a lot of French wine, quite frankly. I fell in love with Burgundy very, very early in my career, and even though a lot of it is more expensive than I would really like it to be, so there's a fair amount of that. My wife really likes. In fact, we drink together about 2/3 white wine is our consumption now. So she likes Sauvignon Blanc and Gruner Veltliner, and so you'll see a fair amount of that along with Chablis. On the red side, a fair amount of Burgundy, Pinot Noir from friends that I really respect. My cousin actually works for Joseph Phelps, and always been a fan of their wine, so I do have some Cabernet, and then can never pass up Syrah and Grenache are some things that I like as well.
So a nice smattering. I'm curious, is there a particular wine from your cellar that you opened recently that drank really well?
Wow. Thinking of something from my cellar, I have to say that the wine that we're sharing together right now, which I first tasted the day that we bottled it, and it was kind of a nice milestone because this is introducing some brand new packaging for us, really the first since our 1991 vintage. I happen to think that the 2020 Estate Chardonnay is probably the best wine that we have made, in the best estate level Chardonnay that we've probably ever made. So it was kind of exciting that it's got new packaging. But if I reflect on it for a minute, I'll probably think of something else that I was super excited about.
Yeah, something you drank. I mean, it could be your own wine, but maybe it was something else. I mean, I'm enjoying this Chardonnay, but...
Well, thank you very much for that. My wife and I, we had a Joseph Roti, Gevrey Chambertin. It was a Premier Cru. I can't remember the vineyard designation, but that was a standout. And actually, I was in Sun Valley for a little vacation the week before last, and one of my very favorite wines is a special wine that Bouchard produces from Savigny-les-Bains. It's we call it the little baby Jesus. It's the Vigne Enfant Jesus, and 2011. It's really a stunning, iconic example of Burgundy, and one of the wines that I love to drink. And the 2011 was in perfect condition right now.
Ooh, well, see, once you thought of it, two good wines you were drinking.
Yes.
So, you work exclusively with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and two very iconic, beautiful grapes. But do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Well, just to correct that a little bit, we do. We actually work with some other varieties here.
Oh, okay.
So back in the day, my father did plant Sauvignon Blanc. He planted Riesling. We've actually stopped producing Riesling, not because I don't love Riesling, but quite frankly, California Riesling is hard to sell. Mm-hmm. But we've made really wonderful Sauvignon Blanc over the years. We have added Grenache to our mix, which I really enjoy. I love cool climate Syrah, just as I love the Syrah-based wines from the Northern Rhone. But having said all of that, bringing it back to Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, they to me are the closest to perfect varieties because I consider the very, very best examples of those to always be 100% varietal, whereas just about, with a few exceptions, Riesling, certain Sauvignon Blanc, most other things actually really benefit from blending.
So, another question, and this can be sometimes controversial and sometimes quite beneficial, but what is your opinion on wine critics and scores? How do they play a role in either your wine drinking or actually in your wines?
Well, I love critics when they give us good scores, and then I know that they've got good taste. It's interesting. Over the years, we have generally, especially in recent years, really enjoyed very excellent coverage by the wine critics. I think that the 100-point scale has probably cut both ways. I think it is probably made wine more accessible to a broader range of folks, but it has also created what I would describe as sort of the lowest common denominator for everybody, myself included. I mean, people don't really read the notes very much anymore. They tend to just look at the scores. And, I on the one hand, I think that that's a shame. But on the other, I'm a person that much prefers to taste and enjoy wine than to read about it. And so I'm not sure that I was very definitive in my answer there.
That's okay. You mentioned you like to taste wine, and also that you and your wife tend to drink a little more white wine these days compared to red. But as a wine drinker, if you had your druthers, red, white, or rosé?
Red, white, or rosé. In that choice, and I do like rosé in certain contexts, but rosé is going to come in a solid third there. My ideal wine dinner experience is likely going to start off with some beautiful champagne. I've really come to appreciate champagne more and more as I've gotten older.
But see, the next question I ask is still or sparkling. So, but yeah, no.
Right.
So
I'm just unpacking this, and then after that we roll right into, it's probably going to be some white Burgundy or some Chardonnay. If it's Chardonnay, it's going to be made in the style that we make our wine, which is very classically styled, old world approach, not too oaky, really celebrating the place where the grapes are grown. And most likely I'm going to have what I consider to be my favorite red variety, which is going to be Pinot Noir.
So basically, red and white, you're not going to choose one. As you shouldn't.
Right.
And still or sparkling, it's still and sparkling.
Exactly. All of the above. All of the above. And, and if it's a hot day and I'm, whether, we don't have too many hot days here in Arroyo Grande, but if I'm in Paso Robles or if I'm in Provence or someplace else, a glass of rosé can be a really, really wonderful thing to have for lunch.
Equal opportunist.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, you wrote a cookbook, a food and wine pairing book, and I'm curious how you approach food and wine pairing. Do you think that there are hard and fast rules people need to follow? Do you think that there are no rules at all? Are there certain guidelines you use? And what would you tell people? How do you approach it?
Well, I guess one of my mottos is good wine, good food, good people. That's going to be a great food and wine experience. And having said that, I mean, I'm certainly not at the expert level that and there are some folks, they tend to be master sommeliers who really have, I think, a special skill in that regard. I would say that for me, there are parameters. If I'm going to have some red meat, I am not going to have it with white wine. I hear stories all the time about people having red wine with sushi, which is just sacrilegious as far as I'm concerned. Sushi goes with really, really light, elegant, racy white wine, or I don't drink a whole lot of sake, but that probably would work too. Mm-hmm. And so I have guidelines, but in the case of this cookbook, I had a food and wine pairing with just about every dish in the cookbook, except for the desserts. There were some cases where it was like, okay, you might try this sweet white wine or coffee. And, but at the end of the day, I really feel strongly that people should enjoy what they like.
So if space aliens were to land on your property right now, which of your wines would you welcome them with?
I would probably welcome them with this beautiful bottle of Chardonnay that we're enjoying right now. It's it's a nice warm day here, even though it's only the middle of March, and I just think that this is a beautiful expression of the grapes that we grow and the wine that we make here. So today, it would be this wine. If it was foggy outside and a little cooler, maybe some Pinot Noir.
So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to taste Talley wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
Well, I think what they're missing out on is the authenticity and the expression of this place that I was born and raised and where I've spent my whole life. In terms of the flavor characteristics that I associate with our wines, with the Chardonnay, more elevated acidity because of our proximity to the ocean. It's a very, very cool region. And so our wines Chardonnays tend to be really dominated by more citrus notes and minerality. And in the case of Pinot Noir, it's going to be a little bit more red fruit focused, some nice complexity, maybe almost forest floor kinds of components, but again, very refreshing minerality that's coming from a contribution of some nice calcareous soils in the mix.
So speaking of your place where you were born and where you were raised, I mean, you've grown up among these vines and you know this place so well. And I'm curious, we know that California is blessed with a lot of sunshine and consistency more than inconsistency like other places. And we know that every vintage tells a story. But in your experience, do you find more variation from year to year or do you see more consistency?
Well, that's a great question. Every vintage does have its own unique character, and in terms of, but having said that, California in general is more consistent, certainly than the Old World, and so I would say, in general, more consistent than inconsistent. Having said that, I mean, there are just certain standout vintages. One recent one that comes to mind is 2016, perhaps the best vintage that we've ever produced here.
Wow. And are there any signs or predictors or omens that you look for that will help you determine what kind of vintage you're going to have?
Well, what I look for is a moderate-sized crop in the vineyard, ideally characteristics of the growing season that allow that crop to develop and ripen evenly. And then probably most important at the end of the season is the lack of any basically heat waves. And those were the characteristics that really came together in 2016, I think, to make it such a successful vintage.
And do you spend any time as you're walking through the vineyards talking to your wines, to your grapes, or in the cellar talking to the wine? Is there any sort of dialogue that goes on between you?
No, I am not that mystical or spiritual. And as much as I love music, I mean, I'm a longtime rock and roll fan. I don't subscribe to the theory. I think music is important for the people who are tending the vines, but I think that's where the influence is, as opposed to music or me talking to the vines or any other plants. And I've spent my whole life around plants, and I don't think we communicate very well.
Well, okay, you're not mystical and into that, but do you have any good luck rituals that you do at the start of harvest or at the end of harvest that are just something every year in tradition?
Well, what has become a tradition at the beginning and the end of harvest is that we start off with some great champagne. Our winemaker's favorite producer is a guy named Pierre Peters. And so, we kicked off, we both started and finished this vintage this year by savoring a bottle of Pierre Peters. And to me, so much of it, I mean, it's really a team effort, is really getting everybody mobilized and inspired to do their best work and make the best wine that we can. And I go into every vintage planning and hoping to make the best wines that we've ever made.
So when you were a little boy, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A farmer.
Really?
Oh yeah, I my grandfather and my father were both farmers, and I could see right away. I got to spend a lot of time with my dad. I loved what he did, and the only thing that moved me off of that was when I got bitten by the wine bug. And the great thing about wine growing, especially producing estate-grown wines, is that it's both. It's in fact, farming is really, assuming we're in the right place to grow the grapes that we're growing, it's really probably the most important part of the equation.
So when you're not in the vineyard or making wine and spending time here, how do you like to spend your free time?
Well, I do like to cook, and I'm blessed to live just about a mile and a half from where we're sitting right now, and so I get to spend some time at home. I historically have been really very active from a fitness standpoint. I was a longtime runner, though I've pretty much given that up. Did go for a nice bike ride today, and then I like to play golf. And, I always walk, and so it's a nice combination of both a bit of exercise and also whether I'm, playing with other folks or just enjoying a little time alone. It's a good time to kind of commune with nature.
And do you watch golf as well as play golf? No, sports watching?
Very little. In fact, I consider both the Super Bowl and the Masters tournament to be perfect opportunities to go play golf because everybody else is sitting home watching stuff on TV. So.
And now you mentioned you're really into rock and roll. I'm wondering, do you have a favorite band?
Oh my gosh. Probably a long time favorite. I'm sort of avant-garde classics, probably the Velvet Underground. Always been a big Bob Dylan fan. I really like Jimi Hendrix. More recent, I was really saddened when Kurt Cobain passed away. I took my daughter to Outside Lands a few years ago and absolutely loved the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. So
wow, nice eclectic.
Yeah, and actually I love old country. I don't like new country, but Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, who actually used to have a place in Arroyo Grande, and Waylon Jennings and Hank Williams, folks like that.
Wow. Okay, so then you mentioned before, like an evening with how you'd have your perfect meal. You'd start with some champagne and go into some white Burgundy into Pinot. So I'm wondering, is that pretty much a romantic evening or an average evening with you and your wife, or are there certain bottles that get opened to set a romantic mood?
Well, pretty much what I just described to you would set a romantic mood. Having said that, neither my wife or I consume as much as we used to, so we have to be, a little more strategic about that. For Valentine's Day, we have a tradition. We stay home on Valentine's Day. We don't go out. And she just loves the classic, basically pan-fried steak. And so that's what I made her this year with, a little red wine reduction. And I think that's actually when we had that Joseph roti that I was talking about just a few minutes ago, and that was just perfect.
Oh. Well, it helps that you know how to cook, so I'm sure any night could be a romantic night if you have good food and wine.
That's kind of how I feel about it.
So when you look back at your life, we're all given advice through our careers, through our childhood, our parents, our teachers, mentors. Is there a piece of advice that you were given that is something you tried to live or work by?
My father always emphasized that I needed to follow my passion. And what he used to say to me, and being born and raised on a farm and in a farming area, he would point out to me that a number of the farms were gone. And the reason was because, in his opinion, the people lacked the passion or the skill or, the talent to do it effectively. And so I've always been a big believer in following my passion.
So when you look back at your career, I know that you are quite a prolific member of this community, I should say. And I'll let you tell a little bit more what you've done, but I know you're the founder of World of Pinot Noir. You have this wonderful winery. I know you've done a lot of work with Farm Aid. When you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Wow. I certainly, serving as co-founder along with Archie McLaren of the world of Pinot Noir. Unfortunately, due to a scheduling snafu, entirely my own fault, I missed this year's event.
Yes, I missed you at it.
But, I just heard what a wonderful time people had. And Eric Johnson, our winemaker, is very, very active on the board of directors. And so, that's really indicative of the kinds of things that I like to do, because I got to start something, and then after a few years, it was time to step away, and I feel like it's in very good hands now. Very proud of the fact that we've now gained approval for the San Luis Obispo Coast American viticultural area. That was an effort that Aaron Jackson we came together on that back in about 2015 or so, and Aaron had started this project, but he didn't think I would be interested because we already had an AVA here in Arroyo Grande.
Right.
And I explained to him, I said, Arroyo Grande is too small. People haven't really heard of us, and they think it's a hot place or a warm place. And, San Luis Obispo, just the city has much greater awareness, plus coast implies cool, and we are on the coast. And so we were able to come together with some other local folks and get this done. And I'm really proud of it, and I think it's going to have a huge positive impact for our community.
Well, I think those are two great achievements, because World of Pinot Noir is one of the great wine events, annual wine events that I love attending, and congratulations on the Slow Coast AVA. But I will also mention that you created the Fund for Vineyard and Farm Workers. So you provide medical and educational assistance to the country's ag community, the whole country.
Or the county. The county. Yeah, and that was going to be number 3 for me. And
had to mention it.
Well, and we've just gotten the endowment is now over $1 million. My wife and I received the letter actually earlier this week notifying us that we had $55,000 in grant funds for this year. And so, yeah, we are super excited about that. I mean, we have been able to do some wonderful things. I mean, during COVID, we were able to put up money to support outreach to the Latino community here, just Spanish language ads, encouraging people, letting them know where they could get tested, where they could get vaccinated, and that felt very, very good. 3 years ago, as part of that larger fund, we started a scholarship fund, and so we're basically benefiting the sons and daughters of farm workers so that they can pursue higher education.
Fantastic. Well, boy, lots of great achievements, and thank you for everything you've done for this community. I'm just adding that as a personal thing, but I'm going to jump over to another fun question.
Okay.
Complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like...
a desert island.
And now we're sitting at a big table. There's a window out there looking out into the vineyard. Your wine's on the table. If you could imagine anyone from any walk of life that could be sitting at this table enjoying your wine with you, who would you want to share a bottle with?
Do they have to still be alive?
No.
I would actually love to have share a bottle of wine with Abraham Lincoln. I think that he led this country, obviously, during a very, very difficult time, and he also was known for his wisdom and his wit. And I'm not sure how much he liked wine. I mean, I've read a fair amount. Now, Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, we know that
he liked wine.
That he loved wine and was really a pioneer in that regard. But I just think that we could all benefit, not just me and having a glass of wine with Honest Abe, but all the rest of us in this country from a little bit of that kind of wisdom at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you said that a deserted island would be a terrible place with no wine, but let's say you got to take 3 bottles of wine with you. What 3 wines, maybe not 3 bottles, but what 3 wines would you want to take to a deserted island?
Well, I think I've already answered this question. I'm going to start off with a bottle of champagne. Then I'm going to have some white Burgundy, and probably, and in this case, if deserted island, I think my wife and I would enjoy a bottle of La Tâche, which most people would say is the world's second greatest Pinot Noir vineyard after Romani Conti. And the reason why I specifically would say La Tâche is because that was the bottle that I proposed to my wife over. And it happened to be our birth year, 1966, and both Johnine and I were blessed to be born in a wonderful vintage, and we've had wines from all over the world from 1966 that are stunning, including the 1966 La Tâche.
I love that. Well, those are your 3 wines, so I'm curious now. We play a little game. I didn't warn you about this, but Since you're a rock and roll fan, I think you'll have no problem. Pairing wine with music. A lot of people, like you said, you don't play music to your grapes, but people like music. And so some of the wines you spoke about and some of your wines, I thought maybe you could tell me what they make you think of, what kind of energy that wine gives. So let's start with the wine we're drinking, which is the Talley Vineyards 2020 Chardonnay. Wow. As you take a little sip and have to think about what it makes you think of.
Right. And so are you looking for a song, or
you can be as general or specific? You can give me a genre, you can give me a musician, you can give me a specific song, an album. I don't know how. It depends on where your mind goes with this.
Well, my mind right now is going to the first Velvet Underground album that Nico sang on. And Nico, wasn't a great singer, but she really made a wonderful contribution to that album. And John Cale, who was, along with Lou Reed, probably the other most significant member of the Velvet Underground, he emphasized that they actually rehearsed a lot more, and that album is so artful and so well put together. And so, that's what comes to mind when I drink this wine and I'm trying to remember the name of the song, but it's just this beautifully, artfully integrated expression.
And what about your estate Pinot Noir?
Okay, now I need to think about that a lot. It'd probably help me if I was drinking some right now. Estate Pinot Noir. I'm thinking maybe Bob Dylan, but and I just love Highway 61 Revisited. So maybe, there's a song, I think it's called From a Buick 6, that comes to mind. That's maybe a little too raucous and a little too rockin' for the estate Pinot Noir, but but our Pinot Noir, especially the wines that really are dominated by our Rincon vineyard, which is the home vineyard. Mm-hmm. There's a sauvage element to those wines. There's something a little, rough and a little wild. So yeah, From a Buick 6 by Bob Dylan, Estate Pinot Noir.
So now we talked about 2 of your estate wines. You do a lot of single vineyard wines. I'm wondering, what about your, your home vineyard, Rincon Chardonnay?
Rincon Chardonnay, and so we're sticking with the music theme.
Just seeing how on your toes you are.
Yeah, and that's going to be something that's going to be a little bigger and, maybe a little bit more bombastic is probably overstating it, but maybe I'm thinking Nirvana, but not quite as aggressive as, and I'm trying to think, off of Nirvana's really big album, which was Nevermind, and I'm on a plane, maybe.
I'm going to just one more. You choose. It can be your Rincon Pinot Noir, or it could be your Grenache.
Well, if I get to choose, I am going to choose Rosemary's Vineyard Pinot Noir.
Okay.
And that's going to have to be something that would be elegant. I'm thinking of a woman. I'm thinking of my mother, and I'm thinking of these boots were made for walking.
I like it.
So
I like
that's what I'm doing with Rosemary's Vineyard Pinot Noir. How's that?
Fantastic. Now I want to try it and hear the music.
Try that.
So we're just about finished, and I have one final two-part question for you. You have expressed your love for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and for Burgundy, and I'm wondering, where in the world, is there another Pinot region or is it somewhere else? What wine region in the world is on the top of your list to explore?
Well, I can tell you that I'm going to be exploring a whole lot in Italy because we're actually going to be visiting my daughter there next month, and really, really looking forward to that. Obviously, not a lot of Pinot Noir produced there. There are some better and better examples of Chardonnay coming out of Alto Adige, and really, really looking forward to some of the whites that we're going to learn about up there. But I am looking forward. We'll probably be in Tuscany for a week, and there are just some beautiful Sangiovese based wines coming out. Of that region.
So Italy is on your list. Literally, you're going, not just the bucket list, but it's on the schedule. And if somebody wanted to come and visit you, they put it on the top of their list. How can they find you? How can they find your wines?
Talleyvineyards.com. That's that you can find all the information that you need about what we do, and our wines are available there 24 hours a day, and so that's the first thing that I encourage people to do.
But visiting?
In terms of visiting, so we do have a tasting room right here in the Arroyo Grande Valley. We are open 7 days a week, I believe from 11 to 4. Strongly recommend reservations, and it's all seated tasting, and just a really delightful experience that folks get to have when they come here.
Yeah, just come relax, look at the rolling hills, and enjoy a little breeze coming in, and sip some beautiful Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and visit Talley Vineyards.
Exactly. I encourage everybody to do that.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us today on Wine Soundtrack. I hope you had a good time, and I hope everyone will come check out Talley Vineyards because it's pretty beautiful up here.
Well, Allison, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for inviting me.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.